No. Before we jump into our top three for real, we need to discuss our honorable mentions. These are the fights that are all really good in their own ways. We're not going to get into every single reason why they didn't make the top list, but they were every single one of these were contenders. So we kind of want to give each one a shout out. So we're just going to go through the list real quickly, one at a time, and just kind of spend about a good 20 seconds about why this fight was really cool, and then move on. So, without further ado, so the first one on the honorable mentions list is Anne versus Haket from Chapter One. This was a really fun fight. I always enjoyed the fact that this was kind of like a little bit of an Isaac fight, where the two girls are still pining after him and like expressing their frustrations with Isaac leaving, and them fighting each other. Haket kind of became a bit of a fan favorite. She even won her chapter on the character poll of side characters. The only thing that really kind of keeps this fight from being part on the list is while it's funness, it's just like it's pretty also inconsequential, especially given Anne as a character doesn't really do much down the road. Next up,
All right, so the next one on this list is Modric and Eric versus Raziel, and this is it's a later one from Chapter Two, and while it's pretty short, not a lot happens with it. But the main reason it is notable is because number one, I believe this is the first time that the crew has to deal with the death of one of their own, and number two, it provides sort of a long running overarching motivation. It provides a motivation for Zachariah that lasts a really long time. Because Raziel, one of the Federation task force, ultimately kills Modric, who has been a long-serving sort of loyal member of the crew well before the Zach was here, and up until this point, I don't think they had even shared much of a scene. But for whatever reason, the two of them sort of hit it off pretty well. But it affects Zachariah very deeply, and he has this deep enmity for Raziel for pretty much the rest of the story from then on, which is sort of what makes it notable, even though it's very short.
All right. The next up, we have the crew, the Tempest Edge crew, the Tri Dragons, and the Enforcers of Port Loom up against the Icarus Troopers. And this was Chapter 2, page 25 to 29. And this was basically like the big climactic, final battle of the Port Loom arc, I guess you could say, where after the task force infiltrates the Tempest Edge and does a couple of skirmishes with the members of the crew, they basically bring in the reinforcements, if I'm remembering this correctly, and things just turn this huge chaotic mess. And after having the Tri Dragons and the Tempest Edge crew kind of go at each other, it was kind of nice to see them have like one big common foe to just having to deal with. And not to mention, I do like how they kind of unintentionally take advantage of the rules of Port Loom and more or less force the enforcers to take part and go against the Icarus troopers as well. And just overall, I feel like this fight kind of serves as like a kind of a nice little like culmination of the build-ups of chapter 1 and 2 with Kaya showing up and how just the mystery of what she is and how we know that people are after her, and just this shows just the extent of how important she is, I believe, with both the task force and just a whole swarm of Federation troopers coming down upon them and forcing them to leave Port Loom and just just leave behind like the first setting that we've grown accustomed to.
and next up, that takes us into a fight that I actually pushed to make the original top 15 list, but I was outvoted on. So yeah, so anyone who agrees with me, blame Ruin Volt. That is Zach, Kaleo, and Gearhard versus Abe. This is Abe's debut fight. This is the fight where Kaleo loses his arm. This is one of my favorite fights in the entirety of the story. I ranked it personally quite high, and this is just it's such a good debut because this is where we get established that Abe is the powerhouse he is. He's like backhanding Zachariah through like the wooden ships on this beach. He takes a bite out of Kaleo's arms. This is kind of also like a good debut fight for Kaleo in many ways because while he's participated in a bunch of fights up until this point, it's the first time where he stands on his own and he like summons rocks to throw at Abe, and he's so reliant on his magic. It makes him kind of the perfect example for someone for Abe to fight because we get to see Abe eat his magic then so much. So like Abe versus Kaleo works really great. Gearhart, Zachariah getting bashed around, and he also kind of gets established that Zach's the first person to mess with Abe because like Abe tries to eat Kaleo, Zach stops him, and you also got Gearhart on the shore who does some helping as well, and it kind of creates this, and he's also the reason why they end up escaping with their lives. And it's just a really, really fun fight. I'd love to go into more detail too, but this is only the honorable mentions list. But this is just an awesome little bit that deserves more attention than it gets.
And that one happens within the same span of time as this one, which is essentially two or three of the Tri-Dragons show up, sort of provide unexpected backup, I would say. And it's notable because this is the other half of a fight that did make our list, which was Leo and Kotanai and Kaya all fighting, and Relton all fighting Madge and Briar and Liz. I feel like it's important to note that these are happening at the same time because while that other one is fairly lighthearted, this one's pretty serious. And even though this specific scene is very brief, I think what makes it notable is that it showcases a couple of things, which is Emerald Eyes is sort of new to the crew of the
For
Tri-Dragons.
the record, this is Rue and CT and Emerald Eyes versus Abe.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I forgot to mention. This is when Rue and Cowardly Thorn and Emerald Eyes they all step in to sort of back up Zach Calio and Gerhardt. It's sort of notable in that it shows that Emerald Eyes, even though he's a reluctant member of the crew of the Tri-Dragons, he's trying to do his best to help. He doesn't really want to be there, but I think what makes the scene kind of golden is that it establishes the partnership of CT and Rue, and also the fact that Rue doesn't back down from anything. And so it's a very brief confrontation and barely even a fight, to be honest, because they lose almost immediately before Abe moves on. But I just think it's one of those that's notable for the relationships at play.
And then next up, we have Kotanai versus Lindsay from Chapter 5, pages 20 to 28. And this is basically happening the same time as the Leto versus Strident fight. So it's on the airfield, just on the opposite end. And I mean, honestly, I've always enjoyed Kotanai's fights, but what I like about this one is that how both she and Lindsay have a kind of a similar vibe, I guess you could say, kind of like a almost like brash, headstrong in a way. Just they gel really well together and having a similar fighting style as well. So having them go at each other is just a really fun thing to witness. It was another way of showcasing just how powerful Light Company is, and in general, it was just a good, not so clean fight between two similar powerhouses.
There's also a lot of great insults that were thrown back and forth in that one. I
Yes,
still remember to this day.
the dialogue was fantastic. Not to mention the fight ends with Gerhardt running over Lindsay with a car. So I mean that was hilarious.
Yeah, it is.
It was.
Yeah, they're just Gearhart just backs into Lindsay, just knocking her the hell out.
I still think that should happen again in chapter 9, but
Oh, if the situation had allowed for it, I was going to reference it, if not have it happen outright, where if there was any point where Lindsay was going to cross a road, she was going to look both ways first.
it would have been amazing.
Oh, that'd be great. All right. Moving on, though. Next up on our honorable mentions is Kaya, Jin, and Tonic versus Tao. This is definitely another one where we really wondered if we made a mistake not including this in the top 15 list. But the reason why this fight ends up just being an honorable mention is because it's mostly a bunch of moments. There's very little action in this fight, but it's a lot of conversation components, especially between Kaya and Tao, who I just want to pretend it never happened, but it did. Like this is where like Tao proposes and Kaya acknowledges she's in love with Leo. So like there's a like because of what it means story impact wise, it's definitely worth an honorable mention. But quite couldn't squeak into the list when we're talking about like what makes a fight a fight. But there's still some really cool stuff here. Getting to see Jin and Tonic kind of work in their tandem sword play. Like, it's always cool to kind of see fighters not be strong individually, but being strong like as partners. We really get to see that interplay. Kai gets a chance to really actually just do a couple good wind attacks and really feel as a magic user. And it's Tao's debut fight. which he'll end up playing a much bigger role going forward. So there's a lot of good stuff here. It's not the strongest fight in the world, but it's definitely chock full of amazing moments.
And so following that up from chapter 5 again is Shiori and Hora versus Jeremiah Stanhope. And this is one I would have liked to have seen on the main list, and maybe it would have if any other main character were involved in it. But apart from that, I just think it's a really, really cool brawl. So you have the two characters, Shiori and Hora, and they're top lieutenants in the Kuroya gang, uh, who are helping the Tempest Edge crew with their heist in Chapter 5. And when the chips are down and everything has gone out the window, Jeremiah, the leader of Light Company, steps in, and it just becomes a knockdown, drag out, just Old West movie style fight, mostly between Jeremiah and Hora, uh, where they're both just throwing each other into and through walls and just no holds barred, smashing each other to bits, and it eventually ends with Fiora and Hora being thrown out a window. And I just like it because it showcases the violence and
I think my
intensity
favorite part.
of a thing like that.
I think my favorite part of that fight is like it's a vivid image I remember is they wrap a coat around Jeremiah's head at one point and then start punching Jeremiah in the head while he's got a coat wrapped around him. It just really shows how violent, but like dirty that fight is.
And it's just great because it shows how all the characters are very underhanded and don't play by any sort of honorable rules. They're just there to beat each other and kill each other if they can.
All right. Next up, we have the Camp Liberation involving Geo, Gerhard, Kotanai, Bedalia, and Zack versus a bunch of Fey guards. This is on chapter 6 and pages 30 to 38. And I really enjoyed about this fight was just it felt like a nice little like climatic culmination to the first half of chapter 6 with both Leo, Kaya, and such being trapped in the Sabers camp, having to deal with the aftermath of the events of the beginning of the chapter. Then we also have the refugee camp, the resistance camp, with Zack, Geo, Leto, so on and so on. Also, dealing with the aftermath and how like the two halves like slowly build up this plan over the course of like a couple dozen pages of trying to figure out a way to break into the camp to free Leo and the others, and just how this liberation itself is just I said, like a nice culmination of that. And despite being very busy, I feel like it managed things still flowed well enough. And
I think a fun parallel about that fight too is it's really kind of a cool one that gets to see the crew working in tandem. Because like that one where it's Zach and Bedalia working together, it's Bedalia's like climbing the walls of the compound while Zach's picking them off with a sniper from the distance. It really gets to show Bedalia and Zach working in tandem, which is awesome.
yeah, just some nice energy.
One of my
Yeah,
favorite scenes.
there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun in that scene. It doesn't really mean much, and there's a lot of bigger fights that follow after, so it's harder to really put it on the pain list. But there's so many cool little moments in that fight that you gotta give it at least a shout out.
Yeah, not to mention it was the first time we really got to see Giovanni, Orvos, even Brienne, in action and get into
Oh
like
yeah,
see like
really?
Brienne. How do you pronounce your name?
No, but I think so. Forgot
Okay,
about Brienne.
but no, yeah, it was.
I
Oh,
like
sorry,
I
Brienne.
miss
go ahead.
that character.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
the
think
video was
so
great.
too.
Brienne was great too. Anyways, moving on to the next honorable mention. This is actually a fun one. That's actually was really also would have been cool if it made the list, but probably can't because there's no main characters involved. Which was Tashi versus Adarath round 2. This takes place from chapter 6, pages 31 to 35, kind of around the climax of Act 2. And this is where the leader of the Arcala Guards fights the leader of the Resistance. Tashi and Adarath just go at it. It's just a really cool fight because it's one of those chances where it's Adarath gets to showcase everything he can do, while Tashi gets to kind of like have this really cool fight. It becomes very clearly Adarath's going to win, but Tashi's like the kind of character that accepts their death and makes the most of it. So because like Tashi holds out for as long as possible, more of the resistance gets to escape. They take out more members of the Arcala Guard. Tashi makes the most of his death. and is almost at peace with it. And there's almost this bitter resentment where Adorat's almost sad that his longtime rival is gone. It's a good little side character fight. And it also will establish Adorat as a much bigger threat for down the road.
So, yeah. So next on our list is Zack versus the Kappa Rangers, and this is also chapter 6, and this is one that I don't think made the main list, mostly because it covers a lot of the same ground as the Ashen Regiment fight does. It's kind of just a bigger, more detailed, somewhat more violent version of that fight. And since the similarities were so close, we didn't really want to put them both on there. But I think it's just another fight that shows the way Zack operates. He ends up fighting this team of, I don't know, what would you call them?
Kappa Rangers? Power
Yeah,
Rangers?
like just ninjas of some sort.
Ninja Power
Legally
Rangers.
distinct Power Rangers.
Yeah,
Sentai Ninjas.
and they gang up on Zack and they chase him through the woods, and he has to deal with all of them at once, and eventually finds a way to take each one out one at a time in some decently clever ways. But it's not ground we haven't seen before. It's Zack using tactics that were sort of forgotten for a long time, and I just really enjoyed writing it, which is
It was fun. It was just a fun
yeah.
fight. It doesn't have a ton of emotional story impact, but it's a good. Zack gets a lot of cool tactical moments. The Kappa Rangers. It's also kind of like the most gritty Wild West character fighting the most cartoony anime characters. It's kind of an interesting clash of themes there. Whether that works or
Right.
not, we'll leave up to the critics.
And it does have kind of a unexpected ending in that Zack ultimately lets one of them go.
Three
And I
of them
don't know.
actually survive. Three of them survive. Zack only kills two. The other two are like
Did
random,
they?
like unable to fight. Yeah.
He didn't know about those. He just
Yeah.
He
Yeah. Let's not give Zack too much credit here. Hold on.
yeah. He didn't. As long as they were out of the fight, he didn't really care. It's just for whatever reason, and maybe it's something I'll drill down on in the future. He stops from finishing the leader.
All right. Next up, we have Kaya and Leto versus Raziel and Corinth. This was on chapter 6, pages 45 to 56. And this was right before the Geo and Yen fight that we mentioned before. Kaya and Leto, this is after they escape from the capital of Mortensella. They're trying to track down a stash that Vishnu left of firearms and stuff. And on the way, they run into Corinth and Raziel, and then shenanigans ensue. I personally enjoyed this because this is the second time that Leto and Corinth met, and compared to the first time where Leto basically cried himself, basically gave up immediately.
Leto gets a chance to kind of stand out a little bit in this one.
Leto gets
It's
a chance
redemption.
basically a chance to show, Leto's character development, how much the fight with Shredden kind of, helped give him the boost he needed to kind of improve himself as a person, become a midget more formidable and stuff. And stuff like that. Not to mention with Kaya, it was nice having her, seeing her step up again, using her magic to kind of defend Leto and go toe to toe with two people who are, a part of the organization that's caused her no end of grief for the past several months. I feel like up to this point, the two of them really haven't had that much interaction, so it was nice to see them together for a bit and just enjoying that.
So next up on the file is Vishnu Orgo Surai versus Omrix. This one is an interesting one. It's a bit of an anticlimax in a fight. It's a little muddy as it was written. We talked a little bit earlier about how people's debut fights can sometimes be a little awkward just because you're still feeling your character out. That one feels very a display for this fight here. But it's a lot of emotional intelligence because mostly this is Vishnu and Orgos finally getting to give the slave master of their camp a 1-2 punch and get some much needed redemption and catharsis out of this. So it's definitely worth a cool fight. They trick Omrix into dropping a boulder on himself, which is kind of fun. And it's a good little because this runs parallel with the camp liberation as mentioned earlier. So it's kind of nice to see it here to just kind of like this is like if they're taking out all the stormtroopers above, this is them taking down Darth Vader below, and it creates a nice little double parallel back to back. After that, we got Kaleo, Leto, Relton, Vidalia versus Raijin from Chapter 1.
This was basically the first fight for those four, if I'm remembering correctly. Basically,
Yep.
they are trapped in the cafeteria. Raijin busts in, and then things happen.
Basically, Raijin cuts up the door that they barricade with his giant katana, what is that called, an odachi or something?
Yes, a Nodachi, and
Yeah, I think in our lore it was designed specifically for killing Sarus.
yes, killing sea serpents. And yeah, so basically, at the time of this fight, Leto and Kaya both aren't really combatants. Leto is Leto, and Kaya really hasn't come to realize her powers and stuff. So she's kind of,
Just hanging out in the spice closet.
yes, exactly.
Spice attack.
Um, while Relton and Bedalia kind of take the lead here. Well, I don't feel like this fight was as good of an establishing moment as the Zachariah versus the Ashen Regiment, or Leo versus Rashid. Mainly because, not because of anyone's writing or anything like that, but mainly because it was just kind of just a bit chaotic since we had four people versus one.
Yeah, it came
Um,
one sided very quickly. Uh,
just
Leto,
them screw
Relton,
around.
Bedalia, and Kaleo working together a little too well for the debut fight.
But no, I still felt it did a pretty okay job with showcasing their abilities, what they're capable of, stuff like that. And if I'm remembering correctly, I believe Kaya ended up throwing a jar of spice at Rashid.
No,
Am I?
that was a running joke that she should have, and I think if we ever
Oh,
retcon the
okay.
series, we totally will have that there.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, no,
Pay me no mind then.
yeah, no, it's okay. There's artwork of it and everything, but no, it never
I
actually
must have been
happened.
gaslit. All right. But no, yeah, it was a pretty okay fight. Nothing like consequential or something that would end up on the top 10 list. But I enjoy it.
See, I think it's a fight that there's a lot to be learned from in that fight. Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
it's got some good moments, but there's a lot of pitfalls. So I think but there's a lot of like you could. It's a good learning opportunity fight, a good
It's
read.
one of many things that paved the road for what eventually made the top of this list.
Exactly. And then next up is actually one I really, really liked, which was the Tempest Edge versus the Battle Group. That was the opening fight for Chapter 6, so like pages 1 to 3. Because this is the only time in the story where we've opened with an action sequence, and this is the four Hiens tackling the crew, and the crew is just fighting them off, and this is the trigger event that leads them to crash landing on Mortis and Sala that starts Chapter 6's events. This is just fun because, as I said, we never start with a battle. We have so few sky ship to ship battles in a story about sky pirates, so I'm very happy we worked one into the story because it was definitely needed.
Hmm.
And pretty much everyone kind of gets to do something in this fight. Like everyone gets to take out some Icarus troopers, or like fire the cannons, or kind of like do something cool. Like Gearhart like shows up on like an anti-air truck and starts gunning shit down. Like
I do
it's
like Kaleo using his magic to make the false Tempest Edge and
yeah.
causing a couple dozen men to plummet to their deaths.
They have
That was
parachutes.
amazing.
They're fine. They're fine. They're
Okay,
parachutes after
okay, yeah.
this.
What am I saying?
That's what I said for all that. But yeah, so it's just a cool little fight. It actually ends up serving as a little bit of a precursor for Chapter 9 because the captain of that battle group shows up again as the leader of the battle group over Chapter 9. So there's a little bit of a precursor there. There's not really anything other notable than that, other than just it's kind of a sky
Well,
battle in a RP that doesn't have enough
let's
sky battles.
lest we forget, this is the moment where Rilton destroys an entire airship.
Yes. There's a lot of OP-ness on there. The crew it's a good chance for the crew to kind of really establish that they're awesome before shit goes the fan. But I said it's mostly just here because it's an airship battle in an RP that does not have enough airship battles.
Hmm. It's also our only fight that starts at page one, though.
Yeah,
Look at
yeah, it
that as
is.
well.
Yeah, it kind of just stands out of the crowd for a lot of reasons. And then the
Hmm.
final fight on our list is Vishnu versus the Protector. It's just a good honorable mention. There's not a lot to say about this fight either. It's just kind of similar to Shirai and Hora versus Jeremiah. It's just a very like dirty match, but it's a good fight for Vishnu. It's a good fight because it's just a really good chance for Vishnu to showcase how strong he is. Because every fight Vishnu's had up until this point, it's either a team fight or he's going up against someone who isn't really muscles. So Vishnu getting to kind of punch it out with like a reptile version of Vishnu showcases just really helps gives the tiger a moment to showcase I am pretty damn tough. And other than that, I think we're good to go on the honorable mentions. All right, top 3 time for real. Right after this advertisement from Raid Shadow Legends.
Ah,